Welcome to Facing the Canon. My guest on the program is David Harper, an antiques expert and the author of the God Conundrum. David, welcome to Facing the Canon.
Oh, J.John, wonderful to be here. Thank you so much.
No, delighted to have you. Now, you are an antiques expert. Okay.
I don't know. I've been called many things before.
I know, but
possibly
I think you're an expert, antiques expert. How do you become one of those? I mean, you don't go and do a degree at university. So how do you end up becoming and having the expertise of knowing about antiques?
What a question. I think it's all about an interest. I've always believed that you can be an expert in anything if you have enough interest and passion, because it's all about knowledge, is it not? And it's easy to gain knowledge if you're doing something that you love. And so antiques, and particularly history and stories connected to people long gone, have always been a fascination to me from the age of 5. So that's where it began. Stories, objects, people, just a crazy fascination. And you by accident become an expert. That's how I did it.
So when you were 5, you started collecting things that you thought had value.
Well, it wasn't the value then. I didn't discover the value until I was about 18. It was the connections to people. So I would hold an object, a stamp or a coin or a piece of pottery or a little box, and I would learn that it was, say, 200 years old. And I just couldn't believe that people from 200 years ago would look at this object and it would look the same, feel the same, weigh the same, even in some cases, smell the same. And it was kind of like the closest I would get to traveling back in time. And so it was, and then I unearthed these fascinating stories, which just intrigued me. And it was only when I was about 18, I kind of discovered that I could apply this interest and this knowledge I'd gained really by accident into making a living, and that's what I did.
Well, you're obviously, David, very knowledgeable in antiques. You're a bit of a celebrity on television when it comes to antiques. I'm very curious. Like, let's say, for example, hypothetically, you went to a car boot sale and you looked at what people were selling, and somebody had a little item and they're selling it for £5, but you know it's worth £5,000. Do you actually tell them?
Well, gosh, no one's ever asked me that before. And I've got to say, John, it's never occurred before. I think genuinely, now I'm a Christian, I would.
You would?
I think I would. I wouldn't just give it away. I think I would probably say, look, I think that's worth a lot of money. Shall we, rather than me buying it, shall we work on this together? And I'd make a story out of that. I think years gone by, if I'm honest, I think I would have seen it and thought, well, I'm having that, and get out of there as soon as I possibly could. Because, like any business, when you're self-employed, it's all about making a living and making money. So, yes, it's a bit of a mind bender, but genuinely, I think Jesus changes you in so many different ways. And it's making me out like I'm a really nice person. But it's true. It's true. Yes, I would do something.
I have another friend, he's called David Watkinson, and he's a jeweler. And he told me that this lady asked him how much the value of a particular item was, and she wanted to get rid of it. And he said to her, well, how much do you think it's worth? And she said, I think it's worth £500. And he told her the truth, which was £50,000.
Wow.
I know. And he said the same thing because he was a Christian, we're people of integrity and honesty. Now, didn't you auction a dinner with Sir Alex Ferguson? And how much did that go for?
A lot of money. So this was at the Natural History Museum in London, and all I had to do was auction three things. It was a big event with 300 city bankers, but it was a good night. I think the champagne was flowing. Everybody was in a good mood, and I started the bidding at £40,000 for dinner with Sir Alex Ferguson, and it took me about 10 minutes running around the stage trying to get the bids up, and I got the bids up finally to £170,000. But I'll tell you what, I was warned not to engage with Sir Alex Ferguson. He was right in front of me. They said, don't get him on stage. He's a very private man. Don't acknowledge that he's there. Just leave him alone. He's in the audience. Think of him as an audience member. But I was so excited after getting 170,000 quid. I literally leapt off the stage. And halfway in the air, I realized I'd made a fundamental mistake because I landed right in front of Sir Alex Ferguson and shook his hand, and he was horrified because he's such a private man. But then I ran over to the guy that had just paid £170,000 and I shook his hand. And I'll tell you what, it was a quite a strange situation because he seemed like really miserable. And I thought to myself, my goodness me, money really does not buy you happiness,
No.
because he just paid that amount of money for lunch. It was like you or I spending £17 on a sandwich at a cafe somewhere. It was nothing. But yes, very exciting.
It's remarkable, though, that someone would pay, but they were obviously motivated by the fact that they were making a donation to charity rather than,
Yes.
oh, the lunch or the dinner's going to cost me 170,000. Well, we hope they had a good lunch.
Well, it would need to be a good one, wouldn't it? Let's be honest. But maybe it could have been, he was a big city banker, maybe he's a hedge fund manager. He probably had a couple of clients. You could take 8 or 9 people with you, a
Absolutely.
couple of clients out there. So, it was, what's wrong with that? A lot of money for a charity, and he probably benefited from it too. It sort of oils the wheel.
It
So
does.
that was
It does.
Yeah.
Well, you have a fascinating book, David, The God Conundrum, and a fascinating spiritual journey and spiritual discovery. Okay, growing up and before you encounter Christianity, what would you have called yourself?
I've always called myself an agnostic. I just thought it was a great terminology for someone who just hasn't a clue what's going on, but has a sense, a feeling that there is more going on in this world and this universe than we could ever possibly imagine. So the idea that of being an atheist and nothing caused everything had always been nonsensical to me. But I thought that the biggest questions in life were too complicated for me. I thought they were best left to the academics, and I just got on with my life. And I come from a very entrepreneurial family, a very loving family, kind family. And I suppose we've never described ourselves as such, but we would be described as cultural Christians. They were never practicing. My mum and dad, they're still around. They're not practicing, not atheists so much, but
And by cultural Christians, like following the values and the principles of
values,
Christianity rather than the
but not
beliefs.
believing in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now you say, David, you say in your book, I think it's quite early on at the beginning of your books, page 3, that when you were 18, you had an encounter, like a spiritual encounter. What was that?
Well, this was something that occurred at my grandmother's funeral. So we buried my grandmother, who was a Catholic, in Coventry City, and we then went to her house for a wake. And during the ceremony, during the burial, there was lots of incense. There was a very powerful smell of incense in the church, but that was hours earlier. In the house, we were stood, a little group of 5 of us, myself, my mother, my brother, my sister, and my auntie, amongst maybe 30 other people. And there's a lot of noise. There's no alcohol, just a lot of noise, people chatting. And from nowhere, we were having a very vibrant conversation. From nowhere, we had this sudden sense of a coldness that went through us and a smell of incense that was so powerful. I can only describe it as someone shoving incense up my nostrils. It stopped us all in our tracks, the five of us. Nobody else, just the five. And my auntie said verbatim, "Did everybody feel that?" We said yes. And she said that was Mum saying goodbye. Now, I don't know, John, what that was.
Sure.
I think since the book has come out, people have been in touch and we've had conversations. And I think it's probably likely a lot deeper than I once thought. But it was certainly a real experience. It was an experience as real as we are talking now. It happened to five of us at the same time. So it was something. So I've always had that sense that there is something beyond.
So you had this kind of experience. Life goes on. Your daughter was not well
Yeah.
and faced a lot of health issues. And I gather from what I've read that she was not in a good place. But
No.
then there was this transformation. Are you able to tell us a little about
Yeah.
what happened before and what happened after?
Yeah, so Hetty, my daughter, she's a singer-songwriter in London, and she's been in London for about 10 years. But for several years, up until around 3 years ago, she was terribly depressed, very unwell, very mentally unwell, physically unwell too, living in a very dark place, so dark that when the phone would ring and it was Hetty, my heart would sink, if I'm honest, because I'd be worried, I'd be scared stiff what this conversation, how it was going to develop, what I was going to hear. She was so unhappy. I mean, her story, I think, is for her to tell, but
Of
as
course,
dark as I think as you can get, as
dark.
dark as you can get. And she tried everything, every therapy, every medication, antidepressants. Nothing worked for her. She went to a Christian school. She was head of choir. She understood the kind of the Christian ethos, but she'd never searched for Jesus. And she was advised to search for Jesus. Effectively, nothing else could be done for her. She did this and she went on her own journey of discovery and praying. She prayed to either die or be saved. It was as
Oh,
hard as that.
she was that ill.
Oh, she
Yes,
was that ill. She was that ill.
yes.
And I knew this, and I could do nothing for her. I was useless, worse than useless. In fact, when I did try to help, I think I hindered her. I caused her to dive deeper into despair because I just did not know how to handle this situation. So we had a terrible time. Obviously, her time was worse. She became a born again Christian about 3 years ago, and it was a bit of a surprise. But the changes in her were much more surprising than the fact that she became a born again Christian. And I monitored this for 15 months, thinking this is likely a flash in the pan. I'm going to get a call saying some disaster has occurred. She's poorly. What? Nothing. Every time I spoke to her, every time I saw her, she was a light. And that's the only way. She was dark. Now she's light. And we would have conversations. And I remember for the first time getting a call and seeing her name, thinking, "Oh, it's Hetty. Hi, darling." And it was wonderful. And because I knew she was well. So in truth, I was critical of it. I thought that maybe it was something that would wash away in time. And then in 2024, at Christmas time, she was with us for a couple of weeks. We just had the most wonderful time. And we talked about God. We talked about Jesus. As I spoke to her on the phone for 15 months, I would ask her questions and then I would monitor the response. And when I heard a laugh or giggle, it was just filled me with joy because I got to a point where I thought I'll never hear those sounds.
So you saw an absolute transformation in
I
your
saw
own
it.
daughter. You saw this transformation. It reminds me, and I often quote this, that in Romans 12, it talks about transformation by the renewing of your mind. And the word transformation in the original Greek is metamorphosis. So,
Yes.
which is what,
Yes.
born again, which you mentioned. So
Yes.
you saw this, it obviously had a deep impact in you. You're still an agnostic. So you
Yeah.
then embark on this kind of searching
Yeah.
discovery. So how did it lead you? Where did you go with it?
It was funny because for years I'd been searching myself for different things, but I think I thought that Christianity was just a bit too boring, a bit too ordinary, and a bit too available. And so I was looking at the East of Buddhism, all sorts of spiritualism. I looked at Stoicism. I studied Stoic philosophy for a few years. I thought I was getting somewhere, but frustratingly, I wasn't, because the Stoic philosophy can help the mind and deal with certain problems in life and disasters that are bound to come along, but it doesn't touch the heart and the mind. And this is what I thought with Hetty. I thought, well, you, your heart and your soul have been changed here. It's not just a mindset. You just haven't just decided to believe in something. You feel this. And I'd never felt that. And it was Christmas 2024, and I sat on my sofa and I thought I'll spend just a few hours researching what it is about Christianity that transforms people so dramatically. And I thought I'd have the answers in a couple of hours. 11 months later, after I dived into these rabbit holes of information, layers and layers of facts and figures, I emerged a completely transformed person myself. So it was an unexpected and very sudden journey, because I thought, that's it. I have to know what it is that has saved my daughter's life.
Now,
Literally.
one of those stepping stones, David, was that you started asking lots of people that friends of yours and people you'd encountered, and several different questions. What were the questions that you asked people?
These are great questions. And I don't know where they came from, because when I first started my project, I thought I've got to get other people's opinions. And there's three fundamental questions. First was this: how did the universe create itself? Or how was the universe created? Was it A, by an accident, or B, by an intelligence? And I found 65% of people assumed it was an accident. The rest thought an intelligence, but they didn't really know what the intelligence was. The next one was, what about life? Where did life come from? Did it just appear out of nowhere for no reason, caused by nothing? Or was it created by an intelligence? More people believed that life occurred by accident. And so we got into these conversations. And the third one, probably the most interesting one now, was Jesus of Nazareth a real living person? It was a 50-50 split. 50% of the population did not believe that Jesus was even a real person. The other 50% who believed he was a real person, the vast majority just believed that he was a good teacher, a decent fellow, or maybe an amalgamation of many other preachers that had been made up into a myth over time. So that was my starting block. But what was interesting is these are really strong fundamental questions, but the conversations that came out of them were absolutely fascinating.
Now, had you read the Bible prior to your daughter's born-again experience? No. When did you begin? Isn't that interesting, though? We always think that we have read the Bible, but we haven't read the Bible. So when did you decide, well, look, let me look at the Bible, the New Testament? When did you start reading that?
Properly, December 2024. Hetty, my daughter, did. She was very clever. She was very cute. She was introducing Jesus to me all of the time. And now looking back, I know that Jesus was knocking constantly. He kept cropping up in different environments with different people in different scenarios. He was there. There's no doubt. But she gave me a copy, St. James, not St. James, King James copy.
Yes.
And to be honest, John, it was too much. I couldn't understand it. It was hard for my brain to get to grips with.
The language.
Hetty's much more, Hetty's much more academic.
So did you get something simpler?
Yes, I got this one. That's the one I got. The NLT, Simple English. So I tried the old one. I couldn't get away with it. I got this. And I started with John in the New Testament. And I think what really helped me was I downloaded some apps, some Bible apps, and I would listen to to any book, and then I would read the book. And I've been devouring. I mean, I'm no expert. I'm no expert on any of this at all. I mean, I think you'll agree. You have to live 1,000 lifetimes to be an expert on this. It's so revealing, and there's so much wisdom to get out of it. You don't have enough time. But I read it avidly now, and it began to really come alive.
So while being a seeker, reading the Bible, your mind's being illuminated.
Yeah. But what I was looking for in the beginning, and for about 4 months, and I'm almost ashamed to say that the real proof of Christianity was in my daughter, in the transformation. I
Yes.
now know that. But in a way, I ignored it. I wanted historical facts, the kind of things I go searching for with antiques and history. I want documentation. And with this, I wanted scientific proof, all of this. And I started getting it. It all started making sense. I started reading research on the beginnings of the universe, on evolution, and it all just started slotting into place. So I came to, within about 4 months, a conclusion that actually what Hetty was believing was probably true. I believed that there was a creator, therefore a God. I did not believe in evolution. I believed in microevolution within kinds. And I understood that for years I got the two mixed up. I thought that microevolution meant macroevolution, as in Darwin's explanation. I realized that that made no logical sense. So I came to the conclusion that, yes, there's a creator. Evolution, it had to start somewhere. Whatever you believe is, life has to start somewhere. I believe that there's a creator there. And reading Jesus, I write about Jesus, the story of Jesus in the book, and I think it's about 25,000 words. It took me 6 weeks of solidly researching, reading about, praying to, thinking, dreaming about Jesus, writing about him. I absolutely came to the conclusion, after studying historic investigations of the resurrection, that the resurrection was actually a true historic event.
And in fact, David, the resurrection is what authenticates everything that Jesus said and did. And that's why
It's
we can
proof
believe it.
positive.
Yes.
It's proof positive. He
Proof
resurrected, so
positive.
therefore everything he did and said is true. So I had the beginning, a God, and I had the ending, resurrection, God. So everything in between is and can be true. So I came to this academic decision. This is real, but I wasn't feeling it in my heart. I didn't have this soul changing thing that Hetty had had. And then a conversation that I heard on YouTube with the wonderful John Lennox talking about
Yes.
Christianity, and how somebody said to him, "How do you know you're right, believing your Christian faith?" And he said, "I don't know, but the older I get, the more convinced I am that I'm right, in a way that only John Lennox can do it." And he gave an example of a girl he used to teach who was terribly miserable and terribly depressed. 6 months ago, he'd recently bumped into her, and she was joyful, happy. "What has happened to you?" he said to her. And she said, "I found Jesus." And it was something, John,
Yes.
that reminded me of that. And it hit me like a steam train, that I got all of this evidence, including scientific, that God is real, Jesus is real. But the real proof of it was the transformation in my daughter. And it was at that moment that I was hit with a spiritual experience that took me to my knees, when I realized that all the doctors had tried to help her, all of the modern science had tried to help her. Only one person fixed her, and that was Jesus
That was
Christ.
Jesus. And you
Jesus.
couldn't ignore that. So
I
for you,
couldn't.
David, when did you and how did you have your encounter with Jesus for yourself?
Well, prior to this realization, where I literally fell on my knees and wept uncontrollably, prior to that, working on the Jesus section, researching the Turin Shroud, I was getting a bit frustrated, in truth, because it was getting so deep, so involved. And sometimes I would think, I wish I could just go back to being an amateur stoic, maybe go and buy a new car or something, throw myself back into the materialist world, because this is getting so emotional. Because I kept having these moments of joy that would come from nowhere. And it wasn't only working on the Jesus section, it could be driving, walking the dog. I'd get this rush of a feeling. And it would, on the one hand, make me want to laugh, and on the other hand, make me want to weep. And it could happen in public. My emotions became so laid bare from nowhere. And I was dreaming about Jesus. And I just felt it was getting so much. And I knew I was sat on the fence. I needed something to break this. And it was that moment of realization that the real proof that I'd been adamantly searching for had been staring me in the face. And so I'd had these emotional, spiritual changing things going on. I think I was pushing away. I think I was afraid of them. I'd try and hold on to them to understand what they were. I'd even try and recreate them. I couldn't. But then when I was hit hard with that sudden realization, that was it. I was absolutely filled to the top, from the tips of my toes to the top of my head. And I fell in love with Jesus. I fell in love with him.
And the light
That's
came
it.
on. The light came on. I know you had
It
your
did.
epiphany, your experience, but
And I wish everybody could have it. I can't believe how this information, this knowledge, this wisdom, this joy is there. It's free for everybody. I've now discovered it. And I think, as particularly in the West, we've been educated away from all of this
yes,
to get us away. And I think it's time now, the tide, I pray, is turning, that we're coming back to God, because it's proven, isn't it? Whenever we turn our backs on God, things go calamitously wrong. We need to face God and run towards Him.
absolutely. Well, there was a very influential book in the 20th century, Who Moved the Stone by Frank
Yes.
Morrison. And I feel very much, it's very exciting that we've got something similar but different.
Yeah.
Basically, you were challenged by the miracle of your daughter's healing that put
Yes.
you and got you searching, and you found the same Jesus as your daughter.
And it's absolutely amazing. And our relationship is so, as you can imagine, is so much better with the joy we share together, the conversations we have about Jesus. It is, and it is now, you can forget antiques. Antiques, I've got to make a living, so I'll talk about antiques until I'm blue in the face. But this topic of Jesus, of God, of creation, and the evidence that is around us. So, we're so blindfolded to this evidence, which is everywhere. The topic of this is so great, and my favorite topic now to speak about, as many will attest,
Is
when I get on
Jesus.
their nerves. It's
Jesus.
Jesus. Yes.
David, it's been a joy to have you on Facing the Canon. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, John. No, thank you very much.
How amazing. Can I encourage you to get David's book and to give the book out to people you know who call themselves agnostic, skeptics, or curious to find out more? Thank you for joining us on Facing the Canon. Please join us again.